The notification sound was almost silent, a single chime in the vast, sun-drenched quiet of their Manhattan penthouse. For Ava Sterling, 7 months pregnant, and tracing the lazy path of a dust mote in the light that chime was the first crack in the perfect life she had so meticulously built. It wasn't a message from her husband, tech titan Liam Sterling. It was a news alert from the New York Post, and the headline featured his name. The photo below it, grainy and illicit, showed Liam, his lips pressed against another woman's. This is the story of how a single notification can detonate a billion-dollar empire, shatter a marriage, and send a pregnant woman on a journey of reinvention that no one, least of all her powerful husband, could have ever predicted. The Sterling penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home and more a curated masterpiece of minimalist wealth. White marble floors stretched into an infinity of glass walls, offering a god's-eye view of Central Park. The air itself seemed filtered, carrying only the faint, expensive scent of white lilies and lemon oil. Ava Sterling had designed this life, or at least she had perfected its aesthetic. She was the serene, elegant partner to Liam Sterling, the charismatic founder and CEO of Auratech, a company that had revolutionized personal data security. They were New York's golden couple, brilliant, beautiful, and untouchably successful. On that Tuesday morning, Ava felt the first real kick from her unborn son, a flutter that had become a firm nudge against her ribs. She smiled, placing a hand on her stomach. Everything was on schedule. The nursery, a symphony of soft greys and creams, was complete. The pediatricians at Mount Sinai were on standby. Liam was set to close a monumental deal with a Japanese conglomerate, a deal that would elevate Auratech from a tech world darling to a global behemoth. Their life was a testament to meticulous planning and relentless ambition. Then came the chime. Ava glanced at her phone resting on the polished Calacatta marble of the kitchen island. A push notification from the New York Post. She usually swiped them away, dismissing them as city gossip, but Liam's name in the headline snagged her attention. Auratech titan Liam Sterling's private data exposed, caught in steamy affair with junior exec. The words didn't compute at first. They were a jumble of alien concepts. Steamy affair, junior exec. It had to be a mistake, a hack, a smear campaign by a corporate rival. Liam had enemies. Men who commanded billions always did. Her thumb, trembling slightly, tapped the link. The screen filled with a grainy, long-lens photograph. It was unmistakably Liam. His custom-tailored Tom Ford suit was rumpled, his usually perfect dark hair disheveled. He was leaning against the rain-slicked brick wall of a Soho alleyway, his face a mask of reckless passion. And pressed against him was a woman. Ava didn't recognize her at first, but then the accompanying article named her Chloe Vance, a 26-year-old vice president of strategy at Auratech, a woman Ava had met at the company Christmas party, a woman she had complimented on her ambition. In the photo, Chloe's hands were tangled in Liam's hair. Her eyes closed. The intimacy was brutal, a physical violation broadcast for the world to see. Ava's breath hitched. The air in the penthouse suddenly felt thick, suffocating. She scrolled down her heart, pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. There were more photos. Liam and Chloe sharing a clandestine dinner at Balthazar, their heads bent close together. Chloe leaving Liam's downtown crash pad, an apartment he'd claimed was for late nights at the office in the early morning hours. There were screenshots of leaked emails, flirtatious and damning. The article was a character assassination, not just of Liam, but of their entire life. It painted him as a hypocrite, the man who sold the world digital security while his own secrets were splashed across the internet. It painted Ava by omission as the clueless, tragic wife. A footnote in her own husband's spectacular implosion. Her phone began to buzz uncontrollably. A cascade of texts and calls. Her mother, her sister, her best friend, Sarah. News alerts from TMZ, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. The scandal wasn't just gossip. It was a financial event. Oratech's stock would be in free fall by the opening bell. She sank onto one of the stark white bar stools, her hand still protectively on her stomach, as if she could shield her son from the poison seeping through the screen. A wave of nausea sharper and more acidic than any morning sickness she had experienced rose in her throat. The lilies on the counter suddenly smelled cloying funereal. The perfect, sterile world she had curated now felt like a mausoleum. She heard the key in the private elevator door. The soft whir announced his arrival. Liam strode in, his face pale, his eyes wide, with a panic she had never seen before. He was holding his own phone, the screen lit up with the same horrifying images. "Ava," he began, his voice hoarse. "Ava, listen to me. It's not what it looks like." It was the oldest, most pathetic cliché in the book, and hearing it from the mouth of the man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, the father of her child, was like a physical blow. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time she didn't see the brilliant visionary or the charming husband. She saw a stranger, a weak, careless man who had risked everything, their marriage, their child's future, his own empire, for a tawdry fling in a Soho alley. "Don't," she whispered, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 shattered promises. She stood up, her movements stiff and robotic. She didn't cry. The shock was too deep a frozen mass in her chest. "Don't you dare lie to me, Liam. Not now." He flinched as if she had slapped him. Okay, I messed up. I messed up, Ava, horribly. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake." Meaningless. Her voice was dangerously quiet. "You call this meaningless?" She gestured around the vast, empty room at the life that now felt like a stage set. "She works for you. You promoted her. You bought her gifts. The article mentions a Cartier bracelet. Was that meaningless too?" "It meant nothings," he insisted, taking a step toward her. "You and the baby. You're my life. We can fix this. I'll fire her. I'll issue a public apology. My PR team is already drafting a statement. We'll get through this." "We." The word was a mockery. There was no "we" anymore. He had taken a sledgehammer to it. He wasn't talking about fixing their marriage. He was talking about damage control for his brand. She was just another asset to be managed in the fallout. The realization was as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. She turned and walked away from him toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. The city bustled below, oblivious. Her world had stopped spinning, but the rest of the world kept right on going. The digital guillotine had fallen, and in the deafening silence that followed, Ava Sterling knew her life as she knew it was over. The only question was what she would build in its place. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated composure. While Liam and his team of high-priced crisis managers from Kroll Inc. were locked in their war room, Ava moved through her gilded cage with a chilling, methodical purpose. She didn't scream or throw things. She didn't dissolve into tears. The pain was too profound for that. It had solidified into something hard and dense, a core of pure, cold resolve. Her grief was a private, silent thing, a severance of the soul that required no audience. She instructed her assistant to cancel everything, her prenatal yoga class, the final nursery consultation with the designer from RH Baby and Child, her weekly lunch with her mother. She then made one phone call to a number she had stored years ago, and hoped she would never need Arthur Finch, a senior partner at Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen & Katz, known less for his corporate litigation and more for his discreet, iron-fisted handling of high-net-worth divorces. He was the man you called when a marriage wasn't just ending, but being strategically dismantled. "Arthur, it's Ava Sterling," she said, her voice even betraying none of the chaos raging inside her. "I need to see you. Today." Meanwhile, Liam's attempts to reach her were relentless. He sent texts filled with frantic apologies and desperate pleas. He left long, rambling voicemails, his voice cracking with a theatrical sorrow that she no longer believed. He even had his mother call a woman who spoke of forgiveness and the sanctity of marriage, conveniently ignoring the public humiliation her son had wrought. Ava ignored them all. She put her phone on silent and let the digital storm rage outside the walls of her soundproofed prison. She packed, not a frantic emotional throwing of clothes into a suitcase, but a deliberate, curated selection. She packed for a different life, an unknown destination. She chose practical, comfortable pieces: cashmere sweaters, maternity jeans, soft linen shirts. She left behind the couture gowns and skyscraper heels that belonged to Mrs. Liam Sterling. She packed the ultrasound photos, the first tiny pair of shoes she had bought for the baby, and a worn copy of a novel from her college days. She was not just packing clothes. She was editing her life, stripping it down to the essentials. Liam, barred from their bedroom, grew more desperate. He tried to talk to her through the closed door. "Ava, please just talk to me. We can go away. Anywhere you want. The Maldives, our place in Aspen. We can turn off our phones and just be us again. Us." The word was a ghost. The us he spoke of was a fantasy built on a lie. She continued to fold a small baby blanket, her hands steady. Her meeting with Arthur Finch took place in a sterile, wood-paneled conference room overlooking Bryant Park. Arthur was a man in his late 60s, with eyes that had seen the collapse of 1,000 unions. He listened patiently as Ava, in a calm, flat tone, recounted the events, never once letting her voice break. She didn't speak of heartbreak. She spoke of betrayal as a breach of contract. "He violated the core tenets of our partnership," she stated, as if discussing a business deal. "His recklessness has not only destroyed our personal trust, but it has endangered the financial stability of our future and that of our child. Auratech stock has plummeted 32% in 2 days. His personal brand, which is inextricably linked to the company's, is toxic." Arthur nodded slowly, impressed by her clarity. "What do you want, Ava?" "I want out," she said without hesitation. "I want a clean break. I want the divorce papers drawn up immediately. I want our prenuptial agreement enforced to the letter, including the infidelity clause. And I want sole custody of my son." "Liam will fight this," Arthur warned. "He will paint you as hysterical, emotionally unstable due to the pregnancy. His team will use his wealth and power to drag this out, to bleed you dry." "Let them try," Ava said, a flicker of fire in her eyes. "Liam built his empire on the idea of impenetrable security. I was his partner in that. I know where the vulnerabilities are, not just in the business, but in him." She left Arthur's office with a new kind of strength. The decision was made. The path was clear. When she returned to the penthouse, she found Liam waiting in the living room, looking haggard. A half-empty bottle of Macallan 25 sat on the coffee table beside him. "You saw a lawyer," he stated. It wasn't a question. "My CFO got a call from Arthur Finch's office requesting access to my financial records." "You're really doing this?" "It's already done," Ava said, walking past him toward the foyer. He scrambled to his feet, blocking her path. "Ava, think about our son. What kind of life will this be for him? A broken home. Parents at war with each other in the tabloids. It was the ultimate manipulation, using their unborn child as a shield. The ice around Ava's heart cracked, and a pure, hot rage surged through her. "You did this to our son," she hissed, her voice finally breaking its calm facade. "You chose that woman, that sordid little affair, over him, over us. You stood in his nursery last week and talked about the legacy you would build for him. Was this it? A legacy of scandal and public disgrace? Don't you dare stand there and pretend you are doing this for him." He recoiled, stung by the venom in her voice. He saw it then. The woman he had married was gone, replaced by a stranger with eyes like steel. "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice softening, pleading. "You have nowhere to go without me." It was meant to be a statement of fact. He controlled the money, the properties, the entire infrastructure of their life. He believed he had her trapped. Ava gave him a small, cold smile. "That's where you're wrong, Liam. I have everywhere to go." She walked to the large, ornate console table by the door. She placed her wedding and engagement rings on the polished surface. The 8-carat diamond, a symbol of their unbreakable bond, looked garish and hollow. Next to the rings, she placed a thick manila envelope. "These are for you," she said. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours. Goodbye, Liam." He stared at the envelope, his name written on it, in her elegant script. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside were the divorce papers. The top page cited irrevocable differences due to spousal infidelity. It was clinical, brutal, and final. When he looked up, she was gone. The private elevator was descending. He was alone in the silent, cavernous penthouse, with a glass of scotch, a set of divorce papers, and the ruins of his perfect life. He had assumed he could manage this crisis like any other business problem. He had fundamentally misunderstood the woman he married. He had severed their bond, and now she was severing him from her life completely and irrevocably. Ava stepped out of the elevator and into the pristine, anonymous lobby of her building, taking her first breath of free, albeit polluted, New York air. For a moment she felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. Liam was right about one thing: she had no immediate plan. Her family was in California, and flying there would mean facing a barrage of well-meaning but suffocating pity. Staying with friends in the city was impossible. The media circus was in full swing, with paparazzi camped outside their building like vultures. Every hotel would be a temporary and very public refuge. She was a ship cut from its moorings, adrift in a hostile sea. Her phone, which she had finally switched off, silent, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Usually she would ignore it, but something compelled her to look. "Ava, I know this is an unimaginable time. If you need anything, a place to think, a safe harbor, anything at all, just say the word. No questions asked. Damien Blackwood." The name hit her like a memory from another lifetime. Damien Blackwood. She hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. They had been in the same program at Stanford. He was a prodigy in economics, she in art history and business. They were study partners, friends, part of a close-knit group that had spent late nights fueled by coffee and ambition. Damien was quiet, intense, and brilliant, with eyes that saw more than he let on. He had a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. There was an unspoken connection between them, a gentle chemistry that had never been acted upon. She had met Liam her senior year, and his dazzling charisma and bold vision had swept her off her feet. Damien had faded into the background, a ghost of a path not taken. She knew what he had become. While Liam built a public-facing tech empire, Damien had moved in the opposite direction, into the shadowy, powerful world of private equity. He was the founder of Blackwood Capital, a firm known for its aggressive, almost prescient investments and its founder's intense privacy. He was a billionaire, several times over a phantom figure rarely photographed, who moved between London, Hong Kong, and New York with quiet, absolute authority. How had he even known? Of course, she realized. The scandal was global news in the financial world. Damien would have seen the headlines, seen the catastrophic drop in Auratech's stock. But for him to reach out. Her fingers hovered over the screen. It felt like a lifeline thrown from a distant shore. Liam believed he had her trapped, that she was helpless without his resources. But Liam didn't know about Damien. He was a part of her past that Liam had never bothered to learn about. Taking a deep breath, she typed a simple reply. Damien, thank you. I might need that safe harbor sooner than you think. The reply was instantaneous. A car will be at the corner of 78th and Park in 10 minutes, a black Audi A8. The driver's name is Arthur. He will take you to Teterboro Airport. My jet is waiting. It was decisive, immediate, and overwhelming. Teterboro. A private jet. This was a level of power that rivaled and perhaps even surpassed Liam's. There was no hesitation, no request for details. It was a simple, clean solution. A way out. She slipped on a pair of oversized sunglasses, pulled up the hood of her coat, and walked out the service entrance of her building, bypassing the press corps at the front. The black Audi was waiting exactly where he said it would be. The driver, a stoic man in a dark suit, stepped out and opened the door for her, without a word. The tinted windows provided a welcome shield from the prying eyes of the city. As the car pulled away from the curb, Ava felt the first true exhale she'd had in 2 days. She was leaving her old life behind, one city block at a time. At Teterboro, the private airport in New Jersey that served New York's elite, she was escorted directly onto the tarmac. A sleek Gulfstream G650 stood waiting its engines, humming softly. The flight attendant, a woman with a kind and discreet smile, welcomed her aboard. Welcome, Miss Sterling. Mr. Blackwood has instructed us to take you to Villa Elena on Lake Como. We have everything you might need for the flight. Please make yourself comfortable. Lake Como, Italy. It was so far, so removed from the toxic chaos of her life, it might as well have been another planet. The interior of the jet was a study in understated luxury cream leather seats, polished dark wood, soft cashmere blankets. It was opulent, yet felt personal and comforting. A stark contrast to Liam's jet, which was branded with the Auratech logo and felt like a flying boardroom. Once they were in the air, soaring above the clouds, Ava finally allowed the dam to break. The adrenaline that had sustained her for days receded, leaving behind a raw, cavernous grief. She curled up in the large seat, wrapped a blanket around herself, and wept. She wept for the husband she thought she knew, for the future that had been stolen, for the trust that could never be repaired. She cried for the innocent child in her womb, who would be born into a world fractured by his father's betrayal. The flight attendant quietly placed a cup of chamomile tea and a warm towel beside her, then retreated, giving her the privacy she needed. There was no judgment, only a gentle professional care that was profoundly comforting. Hours later, as they began their descent over the snow-capped Alps, Eva looked out the window. The first light of dawn was breaking, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. Below, the deep blue jewel of Lake Como emerged nestled among lush green mountains. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a scene of impossible serenity. Villa Elena was perched on a hillside in Bellagio, a magnificent old estate surrounded by terraced gardens of cypress and jasmine. It was not a sterile, modern palace like her penthouse, but a place with history and soul. Damien was waiting for her on the stone terrace overlooking the water. He looked different from the college student she remembered, yet fundamentally the same. He was taller, broader, with a quiet confidence that radiated from him like a low heat. His dark hair had a few distinguished threads of silver at the temples, and his eyes, a deep, thoughtful grey, held the same intelligence and kindness she recalled. He didn't rush to hug her or offer platitudes. He simply stood there, a calm, steady presence. "Eva," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "Welcome. I'm glad you came." "Damien," she said, her voice thick with exhaustion and emotion. I don't know what to say." "Thank you." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "The staff will take your bags. There's food inside if you're hungry, but I imagine you'd rather rest. I've had the main guest suite prepared for you. It's private and has its own terrace. No one will bother you." He was giving her space. He understood without her having to explain that what she needed most was not conversation or distraction, but sanctuary, a place to heal. As she looked out at the tranquil water, with the distant church bells of a small village echoing across the valley, a single fragile thought surfaced. Maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. She had escaped the cage. And in this beautiful, quiet corner of the world, with the ghost from her past standing guard, she could finally begin to figure out who Eva Sterling was meant to be now. The first week at Villa Elena passed in a haze of sleep and stillness. Eva's body exhausted from the emotional trauma and the strain of pregnancy finally surrendered. She slept for 12, sometimes 14 hours a day, waking only to eat the simple, delicious meals the villa's chef Sophia would leave for her on a tray outside her suite. She ate on her private terrace, overlooking the lake, watching the small ferries crisscross the water like water bugs. For the first time in years, her schedule was completely empty. There were no charity galas to attend, no business dinners to host, no public image to maintain. There was only the rhythmic lapping of the water against the shore and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Damien was a master of presence without intrusion. He never knocked on her door or pressed her to talk. He simply made his existence known through small, thoughtful gestures. A collection of classic novels appeared on her bedside table. A soft pashmina shawl was draped over her favorite armchair on the terrace when the evening air grew cool. He would leave a note with her breakfast tray. "The gardens are beautiful this time of morning. The wisteria is in bloom." It was an invitation, not a command. On the 5th day, she felt strong enough to accept. She found him in a centuries-old greenhouse, tending to a collection of rare orchids. He wore a simple linen shirt and trousers, his hands dusted with soil. He looked up and smiled, a genuine, unforced expression that made his serious face seem boyish. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm. "I'm glad to see you up and about. Thank you for this." Damien, she said, her voice still a little rusty. For everything. It's more than I could have asked for. It's the least I could do for an old friend, he replied, setting down his pruning shears. How are you feeling? It was a simple question, but she knew he was asking about more than just her physical health. Empty. She admitted the confession costing her a great deal. And terrified. And a little bit relieved. It's a confusing cocktail of emotions. That sounds perfectly rational to me, he said, his gaze direct and empathetic. You've been through a seismic event. The aftershocks are bound to be disorienting. They walked through the gardens together, their conversation meandering. They talked about their time at Stanford, reminiscing about a particularly difficult statistics professor and a memorable late-night pizza run. They didn't talk about Liam. They didn't talk about the scandal. Damien was giving her a gift more valuable than his private jet or his luxurious villa, the gift of a normal conversation, a space where she wasn't the wronged wife from the headlines but just Ava. Back in New York, Liam was experiencing the opposite of stillness. His world was a vortex of chaos. His carefully constructed PR narrative that this was a private matter, a momentary lapse in judgment for which he was deeply sorry, was failing. The media-smelling blood was digging deeper. Chloe Vance, after being unceremoniously fired and paid a paltry severance, had hired the formidable celebrity lawyer Gloria Allred and was hinting at a tell-all interview. She claimed her relationship with Liam was not a simple affair, but a pattern of workplace harassment and abuse of power. The story was shifting from one of infidelity to something much darker, threatening the very foundations of Auratech, a company built on trust and ethics. Liam's attempts to find Ava had become frantic. Her credit cards were inactive, her phone was off, her family and friends claimed to know nothing. He had hired a team of private investigators from a firm named CQR, but Ava had seemingly vanished into thin air. He was a man who controlled information for a living, and the fact that his own wife had become a ghost was driving him to the brink of madness. He began to spin a new narrative to the board and his inner circle that Ava was emotionally fragile, that the pregnancy and the shock had caused some kind of breakdown, and that she had run away in a state of confusion. He was the worried husband desperately trying to find his unstable wife to ensure her safety and the safety of their child. It was a vile, manipulative strategy, but it was all he had left. In Como, Ava slowly began to reconnect with the world, but on her own terms. Damien had provided her with a new encrypted phone and a laptop. She began to read the news not with the raw pain of a victim, but with the detached analysis of a strategist. She saw Liam's attempts to paint her as unstable and felt a cold fury. He wasn't just trying to save his company. He was trying to preemptively discredit her for the custody battle he knew was coming. One evening, as she and Damien shared a simple dinner of fresh pasta and local wine, a small glass of red approved by her doctor, she finally brought him up. "He's telling people I'm having a breakdown," she said, staring out at the twinkling lights of the villages across the lake. Damien paused his fork halfway to his mouth. "Are you surprised?" "No," Ava admitted. "It's a classic move from his playbook. Control the narrative, isolate the target, define them before they can define themselves. I helped him design similar strategies for corporate takeovers." The irony was bitter. "He underestimates you," Damien said simply. "Everyone does," Ava replied. "They see the society wife, the party planner, the supportive spouse. They don't see the woman who helped write the business plan for Auratech on a napkin in a coffee shop. They don't see the woman who sat in on every Series A funding pitch. I see her." Damien said, his grey eyes holding hers. I always did. That moment hung in the air between them, filled with the weight of years and unspoken truths. It wasn't a declaration of love, but something quieter and more profound, a statement of recognition. He saw her, the real her, not the glossy facade. In the days that followed, a subtle shift occurred. Their conversations deepened. He told her about building his company, the loneliness of his success, the feeling of living a life so insulated that genuine connection felt impossible. She in turn told him about the slow erosion of her marriage, how Liam's ambition had gradually eclipsed their partnership, leaving her more of a corporate accessory than a wife. She began to feel a sense of purpose returning. She spent hours on the phone with her lawyer, Arthur Finch, directing her legal strategy from afar. She was no longer just reacting. She was planning. She instructed Arthur to file a motion demanding a full forensic audit of Liam's personal and corporate finances, knowing that Liam's aggressive business practices often blurred the lines between the two. One afternoon, Damien found her by the pool, a laptop open, a determined look on her face. "You look like you're preparing for battle," he observed. "I am," she confirmed. Liam thinks he's cornered a frightened rabbit. He's about to find out he's cornered a wolf. The stillness of the lake had done its work. It had quieted the noise, soothed the pain, and allowed her to hear her own voice again. And that voice was no longer whispering in grief. It was speaking with the cold, clear language of war. While Ava was finding her strength in the tranquility of Lake Como, Liam Sterling's empire in New York was beginning to crumble with astonishing speed. The dominoes, carefully arranged over a decade of ruthless ambition, started to fall one by one. The first domino was Chloe Vance. Her threatened interview with Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes became a reality. On a Sunday evening watched by millions, she presented a portrait of Liam that was far from the one-time mistake his PR team had crafted. She came armed with saved text messages, voice notes, and even a secret recording. In a hushed, tearful voice, she described a corporate culture at Oratech, where Liam was a king and his whims were law. She alleged that he had implicitly tied her career advancement to their affair, dangling promotions and bonuses in front of her. The affair was recast as a grotesque abuse of power. Whether true or a brilliantly executed revenge plot, it was devastating. The hashtag #TantoraOffAbuse began trending worldwide. The second domino was the board of directors at Oratech. Initially loyal, their patience was wearing thin. The stock, which had stabilized after the initial drop, now nosedived again, wiping out billions in market capitalization. Major institutional investors, like the massive CalPERS pension fund, issued public statements expressing grave concern over the leadership and governance at the company. The board facing shareholder lawsuits and a PR nightmare that was now morphing into a corporate governance crisis convened an emergency meeting. They weren't just discussing the scandal anymore. They were discussing the viability of Liam Sterling as CEO. Liam, who had always commanded rooms with his unshakable confidence, found himself on the defensive. He was arrogant and dismissive, treating the board's concerns as an overreaction. This is a personal matter, being exploited by a disgruntled ex-employee. He thundered over a conference call. It has nothing to do with the fundamental strength of this company or my ability to lead it, but the damage was done. His affair had revealed a fatal flaw in his character, a recklessness that they now feared might extend to his business practices. The man who sold security to the world was proving to be the company's single greatest liability. The third and most critical domino was the one Ava had pushed from thousands of miles away. Her lawyer, Arthur Finch, armed with the motion she had demanded, formally requested a complete forensic accounting of Liam's finances under the justification that his personal and corporate assets were so intertwined that a fair divorce settlement was impossible without it. This sent a shock wave of genuine panic through Liam's camp. It was one thing to fight a PR battle. It was another thing entirely to have a team of bulldog accountants from a firm like PricewaterhouseCoopers crawling through every wire transfer, every offshore account, and every shell corporation he had ever created. Liam had always played fast and loose with the rules. He funneled company money into personal investments, used corporate accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle, and engaged in aggressive and legally grey accounting practices to inflate Oratech's quarterly earnings reports. It was a house of cards, and Ava knew it. She knew because, in the early days, she had been the one to caution him against it. She had been the voice of prudence he had long ago stopped listening to. From her sun-drenched terrace in Como, Ava watched the news unfold with a grim sense of vindication. She felt no joy in Liam's destruction, only a profound sadness for the man he could have been and the company they had dreamed of building together. Her fight was no longer about revenge. It was about securing a future for her child, a future untainted by Liam's collapsing world. Her relationship with Damien continued to deepen in the quiet spaces between the chaos. He became her confidant, her sounding board. He would listen as she passed the latest news from New York, offering insights from his own world of high-stakes finance. "He's over-leveraged," Damien commented one evening, after reviewing a financial report Ava had been sent by her legal team. "He's used his own inflated Oratech stock as collateral for a series of massive personal loans. Loans he used to fund that ridiculous mega-yacht and the acquisition of 2 smaller tech firms. If the stock doesn't recover, the banks will call in those loans. He could be facing personal bankruptcy." "How did you know that?" Ava asked, impressed. A flicker of something unreadable passed through Damien's eyes. Blackwood Capital was exploring a potential acquisition of one of those smaller firms last year. We did our due diligence. We saw how Liam structured the deal and we walked away. It was too reckless. It was another piece of the puzzle. Damien wasn't just a passive observer. He was a player in the same arena as Liam, but he played by a different set of rules. He was disciplined, strategic, and patient, all the things Liam was not. Liam, feeling the walls close in, made a desperate last-ditch effort. He defied his lawyer's advice and called Ava's encrypted phone, somehow getting the number from a source he refused to name. Ava, seeing the unknown number, almost ignored it, but a strange instinct made her answer. "Ava." "Thank God. It's me." Liam's voice was frayed, stripped of its usual bravado. Ava said nothing. "Listen to me," he pleaded. "You have to call this off. These lawyers, these accountants, you're destroying the company. Our company. You're destroying me." "You did that yourself, Liam," she replied, her voice as calm and steady as the lake in front of her. "This is about him, isn't it?" He spat his desperation, twisting into jealous rage. "My investigators finally found you. Lake Como. At Damien Blackwood's villa. Of all people. You left me and ran straight into the arms of another billionaire. Oh, so. How does it feel to be such a cliché? Ava Damien is an old friend who offered me sanctuary when my husband publicly humiliated me and put our child's future at risk," she said coolly. "This isn't about him. This is about your choices. your lies. I will not let you do this, he roared. I will fight you with everything I have. You will not get a dime. You will not get my son. The line went dead. Ava stood there, the phone in her hand, her heart aching, not with fear, but with pity. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money. He thought he could threaten her into submission. He had no idea that the dominoes were no longer in his control. They were falling, and they were about to bring the entire temple down on top of him. Liam Sterling, believing he was launching a counter-offensive, made the most catastrophic mistake of his life. He booked a flight to Milan, his mind consumed by a singular, desperate goal, a face-to-face confrontation with Ava. He was convinced that if he could just get in a room with her, he could use the force of his personality, their shared history, the memory of the love they once had, to make her see reason, his reason. He would beg, he would threaten, he would charm. He would do whatever it took to get her to call off the lawyers and the forensic accountants who were now crawling through the entrails of his financial life. He arrived at Villa Elena unannounced, bribing a local boatman to take him to the villa's private dock. He stormed up the stone steps from the water, his expensive suit wrinkled from the flight, his face a mask of haggard fury. He found Ava on the main terrace, reading in a comfortable-looking lounge chair, a glass of water at her side. She looked serene, healthy and more beautiful than he had seen her in years. The sight of her peace fueled his rage. Ava, he said, his voice tight. She looked up, and her eyes registered not shock or fear, but a weary resignation. It was as if she had been expecting him. Liam, you shouldn't be here. Shouldn't I? He shot back, striding toward her. This is my wife. This is my son you're carrying. I have every right to be here. At that moment, Damien Blackwood emerged from the villa. He moved with a quiet, imposing grace, placing himself slightly between Liam and Ava. He wasn't overtly threatening, but his presence was a clear and solid boundary. Sterling Damien said, his voice low and even. You're trespassing. I suggest you leave. Liam laughed a harsh, grating sound. Of course. The White Knight, Damien Blackwood. I should have known. Were you just waiting all these years for me to screw up? Tell me, did you call her the minute you saw the news, or did you wait a whole 5 minutes? What I did. Damien said, his eyes like chips of flint, was offer a friend a safe place to go when her husband's actions put her on the front page of every tabloid in the world. Now I'm asking you to leave. I'm not leaving until I speak to my wife. Liam insisted, his eyes fixed on Ava. Ava, please. End this madness. We can still save something from this wreckage. For our son. There is nothing left to save, Liam, Ava said, her voice filled with a final heart-breaking certainty. The only thing I care about now is protecting our son from the mess you've created. By hiding out in your ex-boyfriend's mansion, he sneered. You think a judge is going to look kindly on that? The pregnant wife who abandons her marriage and jets off to Italy with another man? It was then that Damien took a step forward. You should be very careful what you say, Sterling. You seem to be under the impression that your only problem is a messy divorce. Liam scoffed. Oh, I know all my problems. The board, the SEC looking into Chloe's allegations. I can handle them. I've handled worse. I don't think you have, Damien said. You see, you think this all started 3 weeks ago when those photos were published, but your problems started much, much earlier. Do you remember a small data analytics firm called Veritas Data Solutions? Liam's face went blank for a second, then a flicker of recognition and something else, something like fear, crossed his features. Vaguely. A failed startup. We acquired some of their assets in a bankruptcy sale 5 years ago. What about it? You didn't just acquire their assets, Liam. Damien said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You destroyed them. Veritas had developed a proprietary encryption algorithm that was light years ahead of yours. They were a threat. So you hired away their lead engineer in violation of his non-compete clause, and then you used your connections at a key venture capital firm to pull their second round of funding at the last minute, effectively bankrupting them. Then you swept in and bought their intellectual property for pennies on the dollar. Liam's face had gone pale. That's business. Is it? Damien continued. What if I told you that my firm, Blackwood Capital, was the silent majority partner in that key venture capital firm? And what if I told you that the founder of Veritas Data, a brilliant man named David Chen, was one of my oldest and dearest friends, a friend who lost everything because of you? The air on the terrace grew thick and heavy. This wasn't just a confrontation between a husband, a wife, and a new man. This was something else entirely. A reckoning that had been years in the making. You're bluffing, Liam stammered, but the confidence had drained from his voice. Am I? Damien smiled, a cold, predatory expression that had surely terrified corporate boards around the globe. When Ava's lawyers initiated their forensic audit, it gave my people the legal subpoena power they needed. They aren't just looking for hidden marital assets anymore, Liam. They are looking at everything. They are cross-referencing your illegal acquisition of Veritas's IP with Auratech's SEC filings from that year. You claimed the development of your next-gen security key as an in-house R&D expense. That's securities fraud, Liam. You lied to your shareholders and to the federal government about the origin of your core technology. Ava stared at Damien, stunned. She had known Liam was ruthless, but she had never known the specifics of the Veritas deal. She had never known Damien's connection to it. The lifeline he had thrown her hadn't been random. It was the culmination of a long, patient game. This is insane, Liam whispered, looking back and forth between Ava and Damien. You planned this, both of you. You are a man who understands consequences, Liam, Ava said, finding her voice. These are the consequences, not just for cheating on me, but for everything, for the way you've conducted your business, for the people you've hurt. The infidelity was just the loose thread that allowed everything else to unravel. Liam looked utterly defeated. The fight was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of total annihilation. He wasn't just going to lose his company and his wife. He was facing federal charges. Prison time. The devil had finally come to collect, and he had been hiding in the details all along. You need to go, Liam. Ava said, her voice now soft with a strange mix of pity and finality. There is nothing more to say. He stared at her one last time, at the woman carrying his child, at the man who had so thoroughly and patiently orchestrated his ruin. Without another word, he turned and stumbled back down the steps toward the waiting boat. A man not just leaving a villa, but leaving his entire life behind. In the aftermath of the confrontation, a profound quiet settled over the villa. The violent storm of Liam's presence had passed, leaving behind the clean, crisp air of resolution. Ava stood on the terrace, one hand on her belly, watching the boat carrying her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband, disappear across the water, until it was just a white speck against the vast blue canvas of the lake. She didn't feel triumph, nor did she feel the sharp sting of vengeful satisfaction. What she felt was a deep, bone-weary sense of closure. A chapter, a whole volume of her life had finally definitively ended. Damien came to stand beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a long time they said nothing, simply sharing the view. "I didn't know," Ava said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "About your friend, about Veritas." "I know," Damien replied. "It wasn't your battle to fight. My involvement was always about holding Liam accountable for his actions. When he hurt you, it became personal on a level I hadn't anticipated. It accelerated the timeline. You waited 5 years, she mused, turning to look at him. That's a very long game. A sad smile touched his lips. In my world, patience is the most powerful asset. David, my friend, he passed away 2 years ago. A heart attack. His doctors said it was stress-related. After that, it was no longer a game. It was a promise I had made to his memory. The revelation settled between them, clarifying everything. Damien's help wasn't an act of romantic opportunism. It was an act of loyalty and justice that had, by a twist of fate, intersected with her own life-altering crisis. This shared enemy, this common cause born from Liam's separate betrayals, had forged a bond between them deeper than shared history alone. The news from New York in the following weeks was swift and brutal. The SEC, armed with the information from the forensic audit, officially launched a formal investigation into Auratech for securities fraud. Liam Sterling was forced to resign as CEO. He was later indicted by the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Faced with irrefutable evidence, he took a plea deal, 5 years in a minimum security federal prison, a lifetime ban from serving as an officer or director of a public company, and financial penalties that would strip him of the vast majority of his fortune. Auratech, its brand irrevocably tarnished, was broken up and sold for parts. The empire had crumbled to dust. The divorce was quiet and uncontested. Liam, stripped of his power and facing prison, signed everything Arthur Finch put in front of him. Ava received a settlement that was more than enough to ensure her and her son's financial security for the rest of their lives. She was granted sole, undisputed custody. It was a clean surgical cut. Ava chose to stay in Italy. The Villa Elena, once a temporary sanctuary, had begun to feel like home. She and Damien fell into a gentle, unhurried rhythm. They took long walks, explored the small villages dotting the lake, and shared quiet dinners. Their relationship grew organically, built not on a whirlwind romance, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared conversation, and profound emotional support. He was there for her late-night pregnancy cravings and her moments of anxiety about single motherhood. She, in turn, offered him a window into a life of normalcy and genuine companionship that his insulated world had long denied him. One crisp autumn morning, 2 months after Liam's final visit, Ava was sitting by the lake when she felt the first unmistakable pangs of labor. Damien, calm and steady as ever, drove her to a private clinic in nearby Switzerland. Hours later, she held her son in her arms. He was perfect, with a full head of dark hair and his mother's deep, thoughtful eyes. She named him Nicholas, a name with no connection to the Sterling dynasty, a name that was entirely his own. As she looked down at her son's sleeping face, the last vestiges of her old life melted away. The pain, the anger, the humiliation. It was all just a story now. the prologue to this new, more beautiful chapter. Damien entered the room quietly, a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. He looked at Nicholas, and then at Ava, and his smile was filled with a light she had never seen before. "He's beautiful, Ava," he said softly. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, a tear of pure, unadulterated joy tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was real. It was a life she had chosen, forged in the fires of betrayal and rebuilt on a foundation of her own strength. The woman who had jetted off from New York was a refugee fleeing the wreckage of her life. The woman sitting in this quiet Swiss hospital room was a survivor, a mother, a woman finally, truly at peace. Outside, the sun was rising over the Alps, casting a golden glow on the tranquil surface of the lake, heralding a new day, a new life, a new beginning. Ava Sterling's story is a powerful testament to the fact that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can become the catalysts for our greatest transformations. It's a story about finding an inner strength you never knew you possessed, and realizing that the end of one life is often the necessary beginning of a truer one. She walked away from a billion-dollar empire not for another fortune, but for something far more valuable: her peace, her dignity, and the future of her child. Her journey from a penthouse prison to the serene shores of Lake Como reminds us that our true safe harbor is not a place or a person, but the strength we find within ourselves. What would you have done in Ava's position? Could you walk away from everything you've ever known to reclaim your soul? If this story of resilience and rebirth resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they too can rebuild from the ashes, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more true-to-life dramas. Don't forget to ring that notification bell and let us know your thoughts on Ava's incredible journey in the comments below.